Being able to use prepositions correctly is an important part of writing task 1 of the academic version of the IELTS exam. In this lesson, we're going to learn when to use at, on, in, by, to, and other prepositions correctly. Let's look at the words increase and decrease. They can be used as a noun or a verb. It is important to know the difference of whether it is a noun or a verb because the preposition that comes after it will be different. For example, as nouns, increase, decrease, rise and fall normally have the preposition in after them. When we do not specify a number. Look at these examples. There was an increase in the number of emergency kits sold in 2012. There was a rise in sales after appearing on television. There has been a decrease in the consumption of sugar this decade. Here, I don't specify any amount or quantity or numbers associated with the increase or decrease. The moment we include a number or specify a number, we use the preposition of after the noun increase or decrease. There was an increase of 70% in sales of emergency kits sold in 2012. We use of because there is a specific number after it, 70%. In this example, you could also change the order a little. There was a 70% increase in sales of emergency kits sold in 2012. Notice how the percentage number goes before the noun increase, and we now use the preposition in because there is no specific number after it. In summary, increase as a noun plus in when we do not specify a number. Increase as a noun plus of when we specify a number. Two example sentences. There has been an increase in the number of students here this semester. There has been an increase of 500 students here this semester. We use in the first sentence because we do not specify a number. We use of in the second sentence because we specify a number, in this case 500. So, we have seen which prepositions to use after increase and decrease when they are nouns. But what do we use when they are verbs? When increase and decrease are verbs, they normally have the following prepositions after them. Increase from X, the first amount, to Y, the final amount. For example, in the graph, we can see that sales increased from 100 to 130 units. From is with the start point of a trend, to is with the end point of a trend. What is the difference between 100 and 130? It is 30. To show this difference, we can use the preposition by. Increase or decrease, etc., plus by, plus the amount of change. So we can say, sales increased by 30 units. By equals the amount of change between two different periods of time or values. When we use a percentage instead of another number, the preposition by is optional. For example, sales increased by 30% or sales increased 30%. Both are correct. So by is optional when we include a percentage. Let's look at the following sentences. It declined by 5%. It declined to 5%. We have a different preposition in each sentence, and they both change the meaning of it significantly. Let's see how. What is the difference between these two prepositions if the starting point is 100%? It declined by 5% means it only drops a small amount from 100% to 95%. By is used to show the difference between the two numbers. The difference between 100 and 95 is 5. It declined to 5% means it fell from 100% all the way down to 5%, which is a huge drop. We use to because we're talking about the end point. In this case, the end point is 5%. It declined to 5% is a short way of saying it declined from 100% to 5%. Sometimes we don't use the from part as that number has already been mentioned in a previous part, and we just use the preposition to mention the end point. When we talk about specific months or years, we use the preposition in. In plus month, in plus year, in the first, second, etc. quarter. A quarter is a period of 3 months of the year. Example sentences. 500 units were sold in December. December is a month, so we use in. The number of accidents doubled in 2017. Profits increased in the second quarter. We use between X and Y when we want to show a range of time, which means it has a start time and an end time. Our example: prices rose sharply between 1973 and 1980. We can use since when we have a starting point and the trend continues until now, until today. Since is mostly used with the perfect tense. Property prices in Auckland have increased significantly since 2011. We use since because the prices continue to increase until today. See our video about the difference between for and since for more information. After verbs that start and end, we mostly use the preposition at before a number. To start at, to begin at, to end at, or finish at. Some example sentences. Initial prices started at $300 per unit. Production began at 70 units per day in March. Production ended at 90 units per day in August. We can also use the preposition at with the verb to peak. Crime peaked at 200 incidents per night in April. When the trend remains constant or steady, we can also use the preposition at. Over the last decade, the population of the town has remained steady at around 10,000 inhabitants. Notice how in the first part we say over the last decade. We use over and during with a period of time. Sales increased over the next 3 months is the same as sales increased during the next 3 months. Let's look at this simple graph to apply many of the prepositions we have talked about. What is the direction of this trend? It goes down. So, to describe this trend, we could use a word like decrease or drop or decline. For now, we will say it decreased. It could be sales decreased, production decreased, it could be many things. At the moment, I'm interested in the prepositions that come next. What is the starting point? 10 units. What is the end point? 4 units. So we could say it decreased from 10 to 4 units. From is used with a starting point, in this case 10. To is used with the end point, in this case 4. It decreased from 10 to 4 units. Now, what is the difference between 10 and 4? It is a difference of 6. So we could say there was a drop or decrease or decline of 6 units. There was a drop of 6 units. We use of after a noun, in this case the noun drop. How about if we use the verb form of drop? We would say it dropped by 6 units. Notice how we use of after the noun form of drop and by after the verb form of drop when showing the change or difference between two numbers. There was a drop of 6 units, it dropped by 6 units. But if we do not include a specific number, we use the preposition in after the noun. There was a decrease in the number of X, or there was a drop in the number of X. Here we haven't specified a number. We don't know if it is 6 or 6 million. We just know there was a drop or a decline. Now compare the two together. There was a drop of 6 units. There was a drop in the number of. The preposition changes because the first sentence has a specific number, while the second sentence doesn't give us a specific number. So we just say the number. Of plus specific number, in plus the number of, and then sales, units, or whatever. If we look at the chart, what is the time period that the decrease happens? The decrease happens from one date to another date. Those two dates or years are 2010 and 2014. Even though those numbers don't appear written on the graph, we can see the time intervals on the bottom axis are divided into 2-year periods. For time periods that include 2 dates, we can say between 2010 and 2014. We could also use from 2010 to 2014, but we cannot mix the prepositions and say between 2010 to 2014. No, this is not correct. Let's look at another simple graph. When does this graph start? It starts in 2004. We use in because we're talking about something that happened in a specific year, in 2004. And what happened then? Something started. Let's imagine it's talking about sales of computer units. How many units were sold in 2004? 4 units were sold. So what preposition is used as a part of this simple description? It started at 4 units in 2004. We use start plus at plus the number. Then what happened? Sales increased. They increased to its highest point. This highest point is called a peak. Peak can be a noun or a verb. Let's use the verb. It peaked at 10 units. We use the preposition at after the verb peak. We could also add the time the peak happened, in 2006. Of course, if we say it started at 4 units in 2004, it peaked at 10 units in 2006, this sounds repetitive. We are just doing these simple descriptions to learn the correct prepositions. Just so you know, instead of saying it peaked at 10 units in 2006, we could say it peaked at 10 units 2 years later. That shows the examiner you can vary your vocabulary. Then what happened after it peaked? We can see that sales went down. Sales dropped. How much did it drop? It dropped by 8 units. Why do we use by in this case? Because it is the difference between the starting point, 10 units, and the end point, 2 units. The difference between 10 and 2 is 8, so 8 units. To show this difference, we use the preposition by. It dropped by 8 units. We could also say it dropped to 2 units, though saying 2 together sounds strange. The sales of only 2 units that year was the lowest amount that was sold, which makes it its lowest point. Sales dropped to its lowest point. So bringing it all together, we say it dropped by 8 units to its lowest point. If we want to add the number that is at its lowest point, which is a good thing to do in order to give a more complete response, then we use the preposition at after lowest point. In this case, it dropped to its lowest point at 2 units. You see, we also added in plus the year to state when this lowest point happened, in 2008. So the complete sentence is, it dropped by 8 units to its lowest point at 2 units in 2008. Then what happened? We can see the trend going up. Sales increased again, this time to 6 units. It increased to 6 units sold in 2010. We use the preposition to after the verb increase when referring to increasing to a number. Then we can see it didn't make a change up or down. It remained stable or constant. What is the time period that it remained stable? We have 2010 and 2012. We can say sales remained stable between 2010 and 2012. See how we use the prepositions between X and Y. Another alternative is to use the prepositions from X to Y. Sales remained stable from 2010 to 2012. Just remember we cannot mix those prepositions. Between is always with in, from is always with to. So, where does the graph finish? It finishes at 6 units in 2012. We use at with the verbs finish and n. Just like start at, you finish at. It finished at 6 units sold in 2012. This was a simple overview of common prepositions you'll be using in writing task 1 of the academic version of the IELTS exam. I recommend seeing our other videos about the difference between the prepositions of time, at, on, in, also our video lesson about for versus since. You'll find that useful too. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you know when we create new videos to help you improve your English. If you found this IELTS video useful, remember to click the like button and share it with your friends. Have an awesome day!